You're watching Car Babble. I'm Ewan. And this is the Volvo XC60, the D4 Momentum base spec, and it's the original release from 2017 before all the facelifts. So it is the current generation, but it's definitely getting on a wee bit now. But is this a good used buy in 2024 as a premium midsize SUV? Let's find out. So this is going to be a driver's seat review again because, yep, I live in Scotland and the weather in January is absolutely terrible and I just can't rely on being able to make a video outside right now. So I'm going to tell you all about this car from the driver's seat, which is not a bad place to do it because the seats in this car, even in the base Momentum spec, are absolutely beautiful and so comfortable. But we'll come back to that. But as I always say, looks are subjective, so I'm not going to say too much about that. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think this is a pretty handsome car, and I think generally all the cars in this segment, its rivals, are pretty handsome. You've got the BMW X3, the Audi Q5, the Mercedes GLC, Alfa Romeo Stelvio, Porsche Macan. There's loads of them, the Jaguar F-Pace, loads of cars there. All of them look pretty good. I'd say the Jaguar F-Pace is probably the best looking in my opinion. But from the outside, it's a very elegant design, and even in the Momentum base spec, I don't think it looks too bad, but certainly you get more chrome if you go for the inscription and bigger wheels, and the R design gets even bigger wheels and more sporty touches as well. So for looks, the R design for me is the best one, but in the Momentum spec, it still looks good. The boot though is not that big. In fact, it's one of the smallest in the segment. If you want the biggest boot, probably go for the Jaguar F-Pace. But yeah, 483 litres with the seats up, 1410 with the seats down, and they don't split 40-20-40, just 40-60, which is not the best, most useful configuration if you've got a couple of kids. And sorry to use the cliche IKEA comparison for a Swedish made car, but yeah, you've been to IKEA, you've got a couple of kids in the back and you've got some flat pack furniture, you want to be able to put that middle seat down and slide it between the two of them. You can't do that in this car. You do get a ski hatch though, for all that skiing we get to do in the UK, but the boot itself is just not that big, but it's a really useful square shape. However, if you go for the plug-in hybrid, it drops by another 20 litres. There are some tie-down points and things, so it's not a badly functioning boot if you like, but it's just not that big a boot. And so if you really need a lot more space, you might want to look at its bigger brother, the Volvo XC90. However, it's not all bad because the back seats are very spacious, and definitely this car, it seems they prioritise rear legroom and passenger space over boot space. And so if that's important to you, this car gets some major brownie points. Loads of legroom, loads of headroom. It's really quite wide as well, so you will get 3 people in the back there for decent length journeys pretty comfortably, although there is a big transmission tunnel in the middle. But the other 2 people are going to be super comfy, super happy. Isofix in our 2 seats, really easy to get to, which is a lot better than older Volvos. You've got a centre armrest with a couple of cubbies. Generally though, it's just a really comfortable place to spend time, and if your kids are past the stage of needing booster seats and child seats and they get to sit on these lovely comfy seats, they will thank you for it. But the star of the show in this car is sitting up front. It really is such a lovely place to be. This new, or say new, but back in 2017 it felt very new and fresh. Digital infotainment that's a portrait style 9-inch screen, which, you know, everybody's going towards these massive screens and they're getting bigger and bigger. But Volvo again were ahead of the game with this stuff, and everything just feels so modern, driver centric, none of this facing away from the driver nonsense, but the driving position is so comfortable. With the Momentum, the seats, as I say, are still absolutely amazing. And if you go for the Momentum Pro, you would get thigh extensions, fully electric seats, and then laterally went to Plus, and it's the same kind of thing. And if you go for the Inscription, you get softer leather, and then you get the R design, which has Alcantara. But even without the thigh extensions, these seats are like armchairs. They're absolutely lovely. You could do such long journeys in these and get out feeling great. You've got semi-electric adjustment for tilt. You have to use the manual bit to actually move it back and forth, but you can still tilt your seat, which is important. And you've got 4-way electric lumbar support on both sides. And do you get that even if you have an optional pack in a BMW? No, you don't. But Volvo were like, no, we actually care about your back, so we're actually going to make sure that you're covered there and you've got lumbar support. So yeah, 4-way, really, really important to have that, I think, in cars these days. And they're just so comfortable. The whole driving position is just fantastic. If you're going to be spending a lot of time on the motorway, you're going to struggle to beat this. But the design is just so Swedish, classy, elegant, and minimalist, and that's not going to be for everybody. You know, I do like a lot of buttons. Of all the touchscreens I've used to date, I have to say I find the one in the Volvos to be one of the best. It's so easy to use. The icons are really big. It's really intuitively laid out. This one from 2017 had a little bit of lag, but it gets better with the years since it came out, and now you actually get a Google-based system, so they've updated that entirely. And the digital cockpit, that's been refreshed as well, but the one you got in 2017, if you went for the base Momentum spec, you got a single digital cluster in the middle with sort of not really fully digital on the sides, and that I think kind of looks a bit of the only thing that makes the car go, hey, you've got the base spec. Whereas if you went for the Pro or you went for the Inscription or R Design, you got the dual full cockpit with 2 dials, and I think that looks a lot better. So for me, as somebody with OCD, that would bother me to have that one when I'm still looking at it going, it's not fully digital, you know, but it's still got the information you need. You've got digital speedo there, which is the main thing I want to see. And what I love is that you just get this 9-inch portrait style touchscreen from the base spec. All the cars get it across the range. It's not like in a BMW where you start off with this piddly screen in some cases and then you have to pay for a pack to get a bigger one. You know, it's nonsense like that. You've just got it from the start and you don't feel shortchanged because of that. And the real only difference then you can tell between the specs is the seats and some of the trim inlays, but otherwise they're fairly consistent in the way they look, and therefore, yeah, even with a Momentum base spec, you don't feel shortchanged. Where it does lag a little bit behind the Germans is on interior build quality and just the kind of quality of the materials in some places. Quite a bit of piano black around the infotainment system, which smudges and scratches easily, and yeah, just the fit and finish of stuff is just not quite as good, as well damped. In an Audi, you've got that orgasmic clicky feeling sound to the buttons. It makes you just want to keep clicking them all day long. They're so good. And just, yeah, there's just a few plasticky buttons. I don't like this little plastic, you know, it's meant to be crystal effect drive mode select. I think that's really naff. And the start stop is you turn it a bit like a key to start it clockwise, and you do the same again to stop it. But yeah, whatever, it's just, they're just not really satisfying, and it just doesn't feel, I mean, that doesn't move, but door close is solid enough, but it's not as good as older Volvos or an Audis either. Overall, it's just lagging a little bit there, but not enough to bother me. What I do not like though is the steering wheel buttons. They are a bit plasticky. Thankfully, this one has the kind of matte effect on it. They don't have the piano black like you get in other Volvos, which look particularly naff, but they're just really plasticky and they don't have a satisfying click. Responsive to touch, but yeah, they just don't look that amazing, but certainly the matte black is less of a problem. Storage is bloody great though. You've got this retractable bit here so you can cover it up, and you've got a couple of cup holders down here you can get in. They're not very deep, but you'll fit just about any size bottle in there. You've got another little space, you can put your key there, bit at the front for more stuff, change or whatever. It's all rubber lined as well, which will help it not rattle about. Decent center bin, felt lined USB port in there, big door bins, felt lined on the side, but rubber mats on the bottom to stop things rolling about. You've got a massive bottle in there like this bad boy, and you've got more space at the back. You've also got an absolute beast of a glove box, which is felt lined. No sunglasses holder, but generally storage and cubbies is ace. What isn't so ace though is this key. Now this one's actually got a protective case on it that the owner put on it, so I can't actually show you the real key inside, but you can kind of see there's nothing on the big faces, no buttons here. They're all down the side, and that's the key point I want to make here is if you don't have keyless entry, which this base spec does not have, and I love keyless entry, when you walk up to the car, you can't just open the door if the key's in your pocket. You're gonna have to press the buttons. And so if it's in your pocket, you want to be able to feel an easy button to press, and in older Volvos that was the case, and in a lot of other cars, but in this they're just these tiny little buttons down the side, and it's quite difficult to know which side you've got to press. Just a bit of a faff, and just generally not that easy to know which button to press, and it just makes the whole process of getting in and out of your car just a little bit more inconvenient than it needs to be. And the key just doesn't feel particularly good quality, which is probably why they put a case on it. So Volvo, you need to work on your keys. But there are a few things about Volvos that make me go, God, I feel like I need another Volvo in my life. I just love certain things about them that other car manufacturers don't seem to get right enough of the time. And having had so many Volvos, I've really been able to sort of chalk up all these little things. And some of them are quite subtle and insignificant, and others are really quite important. But the first thing I always find amazing about Volvos is just that the tech always seems to work, and in every one I've had, adaptive cruise control has always worked, never missed a beat. I've never had the brakes slammed on me when I've been in a different lane to another car and it's thought we're in the same lane, all that kind of stuff. And in this car, adaptive cruise control works great again, but also high beam assist, adaptive LED headlights. You never get flashed by oncoming traffic because they didn't dip quick enough. It always works. In this car, I tested it and it worked absolutely brilliant. And other cars I've had an Audi A6, high beam assist was useless. In my BMW F33 series, not good enough either. There's times where it doesn't work quick enough. And this car, no problem whatsoever. A couple of other quirks that I love are things like that you can drop the back headrests in the back seats electrically. Can't do it in this car because it's a base spec. But yeah, the idea is you drop them and it maximizes your rear visibility. Great. Only Volvo thinks of stuff like that. But it's also really good because if your kids are in the back and one of them's being a bit of a dick, you can just press the button, dump them in the head, and go, hey, stop that. You know, but also you get the integrated booster seats as part of the family pack, which this car also doesn't have. Amazing, because yeah, if you've got kids that need booster seats, you don't need to bother with that anymore. You can just literally ratchet up the seat and they can sit on it, and therefore they still get the benefit of the lovely comfy seats you get in the front, in the back. But there's one other thing that I absolutely love about Volvos, and I'm going to give you an analogy for this, right? So when me and my wife went to Florida once, we went to a restaurant and we were planning to have steaks for our dinner, but we thought we'll get some nachos for a starter to share. And these nachos turned up, and this mountain of nachos was so big I could barely see my wife across the table. By the time we'd actually chowed into those, we didn't want the steaks anymore. We were absolutely full. That's kind of how I feel about Volvo standard sound systems. They are so good that you do not need to pay for an upgrade to the Harman Kardon mid-range one or the Bowers & Wilkins top-range one, which is apparently absolutely incredible. 330 watts, 10 speakers with the standard system, and it is so good. Once it's been running a bit, you are not going to need more. So what's this thing like out on the road? It's a mixed bag, but the key thing here is the steering is really unresponsive. It's super light, which will be great around town, but out on a country road, it's really not very confidence inspiring. And so if you are looking for a more spirited drive and to really enjoy the bends, get an F-Pace or get an X3 or a Macan, something like that, because they will be worlds apart from this. This is a car that's designed for comfortable cruising, loading up the car with your family and taking them on the motorway, and everybody has a really chilled time. That's the kind of car this is. So it's not criticism, but it is definitely not a car that on a country road is really that much fun to drive. But this is not a performance car, and it's not designed to be. And yeah, if you want that, you're definitely going to want to look at some of the German options, because they're going to be a lot quicker and more fun to drive. This one was the original 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged diesel engine, the D4, producing 187 brake horsepower and about 400 newton meters of torque. And it would get 0 to 60 in about 8.5 seconds. And really, that is enough performance. Bottom line is, can you overtake somebody on a country road with that? Yes, you can. So that's all you really need. So from that point of view, it's absolutely fine. If you want a bit more performance out of this, and let's be clear, there are no 6-cylinder options like you'll get with some of the Z Germans, and therefore you can get the D5, which has a little bit more performance out of the same 4-cylinder, and you can also get the Polestar upgrade, which adds a few extra horsepower. That's the best way to go in that regard if you want a fully internal combustion engine powertrain. If you go for the electrified versions, plug-in hybrids, you can get a T8, which has more performance, and there are some petrols as well, but they are going to be very thirsty. And on that, this is getting 35.6 mpgs over a long period of time. I'm not sure how long, but that sounds about right from what I've read about the real world economy for this car. And this car is doing mixed driving, so motorways, country roads, town, the whole lot. So I'd say that's pretty respectable. You'll get some that will be a bit lower than that, but overall I think if you can get that out of a car this size, your quid's in. If you go for plug-in hybrid, you're going to get way better fuel economy, but it's also going to be a lot more expensive to buy. But the suspension is pretty softly set up. If you go for the R design, it's a lot stiffer and arguably will be quite unsettled at times, and you'll get much bigger rims. This is riding on 17s, and so it is a very comfortable ride in that regard. So again, just going to cosset you about, and your kids are going to be just jostling along very comfortably in the back, probably having a wee nap. But there is a wee bit of body roll as well in the Benz, and so just generally speaking, for comfortable driving in a straight line, it's great. For throwing it around the bends, not so much. One thing I do love though about the driving experience of any Volvo is that it gets a 8-speed torque converter gearbox, and I love torque converter gearboxes. I really don't like dual clutches. I've said this in pretty much every video I've done. I just find, unless you're doing a lot of racy driving, that they actually make compromises that I can't be bothered with. They're much more jerky at lower speeds. This car can be jerky at lower speeds, but the gear changes are pretty smooth. It's very responsive, but it's also very reliable. So if you're buying this as a used buy from a few years ago, that matters, because dual clutches are less reliable out of warranty, particularly that could lead to a big repair bill, whereas torque converters don't tend to have a lot of problems with them. And so again, you know, if you're not doing spirited driving, you don't get any paddles with this. You do in the R design, but you don't need really sharp, fast, you know, gear changes. You just want a reliable gearbox that will find the right gear most of the time, and this does. What isn't so great and spoils the sort of costing ride a little bit is the refinement side of things. It's not that quiet in here, and that's partly to do with just like road noise and wind noise. But mostly that diesel engine, particularly at idle, is very loud and rattly. It's one of the worst I've heard. Even when it's revving out, you do go, oh, yeah, I can hear that a bit. So it's not like the most serene experience. If you want that, get an Audi Q5. Visibility though is a really strong point for the car. You've got this interior mirror that's frameless, which I love. Good big size wing mirrors, good view around the car, high res rear view camera as well. So you're not gonna have a problem parking this thing, even though it's a big car, but you've also got a really high driving position, so you've got a really good view out over the road, and with those lovely headlights that I mentioned that have amazing high beam assist, at night it's going to take the strain out of driving, which is less distracting, having to dip your beams and all that. That really does help a lot. Generally, just the visibility side of things in this car is top notch. So if you want to get one of these as a used buy with like 50 to 60,000 miles on the clock from 2017, you could pick one up with a base Momentum spec for about 18.5 grand, which feels like quite good value considering how much standard kit you get in this car. If you were to go for a brand new one, you're starting at about 47.5 grand, and by the time you add on better specs, options, powertrains, you could easily go in the 60s. And that's the same with all the other premium mid-size SUVs, so it's not really an issue in that regard. But in terms of a used buy, I think 18.5 grand to maybe 20 grand for this type of car, it's reasonably good value. They're not the most reliable compared to previous Volvos, so there are potentially things that could go wrong, but generally speaking, I think the amount of kit you're getting in this car is really good. You've got an amazing standard sound system, amazingly comfy seats, semi-electric adjustment, four-way electric lumbar support. You've got adaptive cruise control. You've got this whole standard infotainment across the range, which looks great. Adaptive cruise control, though, is such an important thing because you will struggle to find that in any used German car. They just don't have them. It's an option that you have to tick to get it, and very few people seem to tick it. So the fact you've got that in this car is great. In the newer Volvos, that is now an option in certain packs, but in the older ones, that's another reason maybe to get a used one, is you did get it as standard. And it's such a great feature to have, particularly if you do a lot of motorway driving. Generally just feel like you get an awful lot of stuff here, and the only things you're really missing that would be super would be fully electric seats, maybe keyless entry, and this one has the high beam assist, but it doesn't have the adaptive shadow technology that splits the beams around oncoming traffic, but that's really a kind of nice thing to have. But Volvo have such great brand loyalty. You'll see a lot of people that drive Volvos forever, and there's a reason for that, because once you drive a Volvo, you start to realize there's things about them that you don't get from other cars, and that put a smile on your face and just give you satisfaction long term that you don't get out of other brands. And yeah, sporty drive's a really great thing to have, but if that's not something you massively need, then the other end of the spectrum, where comfort and just feeling at peace when you're driving and you get out the other end feeling refreshed, those things can really matter to a lot of people. And they matter to me as well. And so I'm a bit conflicted because I'm also a bit of a petrol head and I really want a car that's fun to drive. I would love to have a comfy cruiser and then a weekend sports car. So maybe one day we'll get there. But right now, comfort feels to me to be more important. And if a mid-size SUV, the main purpose of that is more likely to be for comfort and for hauling your family about. And therefore, I think this is one of the best cars for it. So please do give it a look, either as a used buy, where I think the value is, or as a new buy as well, where it's roughly the same price as most of its competitors. But those are my thoughts. I'd love to know yours in the comments. Please do leave me one. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.